See it. Oh, okay.
But he was glad it didn't actually. I understand.
Yeah. I'm here. But these on all of them, I see. Yeah, that's a sleep. I'll say that.
This is a test. This is only a test. Coming through? Great. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Check, check, check. Mic 1. Great. You want me to test the testing, testing. This is the guest mic, the public mic, the great. Test, test. Great.
Yeah. So I just heard it. Oh, yeah, they've on there. But then that makes one of them louder and one of them quieter.
Yeah, I think we can realize that.
Test, test, test. Testing, testing. Check, check, check. Are you seeing audio levels on the other side? Okay, great. Test, test, test. Testing 1 2. Check, check, check. 1 2. Testing, testing. Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their party. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog.
Take typing a long time ago. When you
I
was
did. I
Got typing class, 7th grade, and then the
teacher let me pass. I think it was the first week. I said, "Can I just take the final exam?" He's like, "Sure." And I took it and passed. And then he's like, "Great, you don't have to take the class." And I was like, "Great." I got the credit, and then I had a study hall.
Oh, well, that's even better.
Yeah, I could get some home.
I am going to use a mic. Not that I need one, but I'll use it. So thank you all so much for coming tonight. Welcome to our new room. It's called the Best Room right now. That's the name. Big empty space today because we couldn't think of a good name, but that's what it stands for. But this is sort of the initiation of the space. We haven't used it yet for this. We sort of have temporary microphone and video. Eventually, this room's going to be totally equipped like town hall with cameras, 2 cameras and sound system. So it'll be equipped for board meetings or functions or video chats or whatever you want to do. So we're really excited about it. It came out great. But we're going to get started. Let me see. The first thing, does anyone need the Wi-Fi code? Yes, Wi-Fi. Yes, Wi-Fi. You should see HSD guest. It's 057277. 057277. Bathrooms are just outside the door to the right. Unisex bathroom right there. What we're going to do is have presentations, then leave like 10 or 15 minutes for questions after each presentation. If there aren't any, we're going to quickly move on. We do have participants on Zoom, so I'll be monitoring that with Mike's help. And that's pretty much it. So first up tonight is the school bond, the school district facilities improvement bond. I'm going to ask Sara Campbell and Jonathan Garthwaite to come up and talk about that. Any questions before we get started? All right.
Hi, I'm Sara Campbell. I am from White River Junction. I don't have to say that when I'm on the board, do I? I'm not going to read slides. You're okay. I'm not going to read the slides to you, but I am going to flip through as we talk. So as we've already discussed, one of the reasons for this bond is the aging infrastructure and thinking very carefully about a long-term plan for our school district. So some of the challenges that we obviously have all noticed are growth in the area, the housing needs, the new developments that are already on the books for the area, and what that would mean for how our schools are distributed. And then we have 450,000 square feet of facilities, and education has changed drastically in the, our newest building is 30 years old. So how do we look at how do we best use these spaces for the demographics that we have coming? So that is a big part of this bond, is to fix and catch up with a lot of the facility maintenance that is needed, and then to come up with a long-term plan for how to best use these spaces. It's not just curricular use, it's program use, it's community use, it's all of the possible ways that we would use these spaces as a community. So there is a giant list that we can post again, but is also available as part of our meeting notes of very specific items that are on these on this. Don't want to say the word list again. But life safety systems and mechanical systems are a required update. So we're going to be spending a lot of money in the next 3 or 4 years, regardless of whether the bond passes. And I'll let Jonathan answer specific questions on those if you guys have any. But the gist of it is we're going to have to make these improvements just for regulatory reasons. Sprinklers, we all want our kids to have. We want to update our locking and access controls to our buildings, those kinds of pieces. And then we want to make really thoughtful choices about our program spaces, athletics, arts, like what kinds of uses are we going to have in the future for our students? Any questions right now? All right. So this is pretty much what I said at the beginning. We really want to spend a lot of time with some experts in this space on planning our future. And we've heard folks say that, we have a lot of smart people in town who know this kind of work. And while we really want to include community members in these committees and in these conversations, we also want some expert advice. We need people who've looked at across the board how catchment studies work, which is which areas go to which schools, and then possible alternative uses for each of our buildings. Are they always going to be like, are we going to end up with a K3, or are we going to focus our pre-K in a specific building? Like there's tons of ways to look at this. And so we want to get a thoughtful process for that. And then again, how we look at our actual programmatic needs. I've already said all this, sorry. Anyway, so we want to fund our long-term planning, and then the sustainability part is a big thing too. So Jonathan might have a better quote for me. It's like $1.5 million a year just for general maintenance of the amount of space that we own. So just the formula on how do you keep 450,000 square feet up to date it's a big number. And so we want to take all of that into account and how we're planning for the future. Did I get that number even close? Close enough. Okay, good. For government work, which is what I'm doing right now. Sorry. Okay, so financing, I am going to let Jacob talk a little bit about this because numbers are not my thing. You want to go?
So this is the draft schedule that we've got from the Vermont Bond Bank for a 20-year bond, about 21 million. You'll see the principal amount, total interest, and then the total cost of the bond, approximately 30,165,975.
Next slide, here the next slide too.
When we start to talk about, the impact on the budgets, there is $715,000 of interest included in the FY25 budget. We would delay principal for a year. So that bond interest for FY25 adds about 6 cents to the FY25 projected actual tax rate. And then FY26 is when we would add that principal about a little over $1 million. And we'd have about $825,000 of interest. Now, what do you say? What does that do to my tax rate? You're looking at about 166.5 on the projected homestead property for a $300,000 home, and about $90 for income sensitivity on a $300,000 home, based on the current yields, which are yet to be finalized. But with today's picture, that's what we're looking at. So.
Thank you. I think we can do questions now, Jonathan. Yes.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Garthwaite, the facilities director here, Hartford. Very quickly, just a kind of a point from my perspective. We talk about all the aging infrastructure, the older buildings needing things like sprinkler systems and fire alarm systems. It's not that we don't have them. We do, and they're inspected and functional. We take good care of them. We're just limited in what we can do with them. Nothing more can really be done with these facilities until we bring things up to code. So everything's functional. I like to say we're at a critical point, but not at a crisis. We need to address these things so that we can move ahead in all the ways that Sara just described. So with that in mind, does anybody have any specific questions about what needs to be done or how it gets coordinated with the larger scope of project?
Hi, Kathy Malisik, Wilder, Vermont. I always forget. I have such a booming voice.
We do have a few people on Zoom who have questions, but we'll let you go first.
Thank you. Could you talk a little about how successful we were with the bond for the Wilder School? Bringing in the tuition students and all of that, and how that was brought up to date, and how we hope not to have to do something like that in the future if we do this.
I could, but I wouldn't be very informative because I wasn't here. Tom, do you want to address that?
I'm happy to have Tom do it.
Slightly partial because I am very, very proud of what we did at the Wilder School. It is beautiful and it's serving the kids so well. We are still working on improving or increasing tuition students there. We have about 35 students there, I think. It sort of ebbs and flows, but there is a tremendous amount of need for both of the programs that are housed in that program. One is for students with severe classic autism, and the other is for students with serious emotional disturbance. And there's a big need in the area for students to go there. So I would say it's very successful. It looks beautiful. It's stood the test of time. Many of us have been in there, I know, and commented how good it looks, even though it's been 3 or 4 years since we did the renovation. So all in all, I think it was very successful. Most of the cost of that project, well, all of it is split up to the towns that send students to that school, part of the tuition payment. So it's worked out really well for the town of Hartford.
Thank you very
Did I
much.
answer everything?
Yeah, I was.
You stand to the mic because the folks in cyber
Yeah.
world can't hear us.
Yeah, I was in favor of that too. And I'm so pleased at what was done and that I don't think everybody understands that we get income from that program from area school districts, which is nice to be able to put in while we're also serving kids who need assistance. So thank
Similar
you.
to the building we're in, all of the costs are borne by the town that sends students. So if you have, 35 students from Enfield or Canaan, Mascoma, 25 from Woodstock, 50 from Hartford, it's proportioned out depending on how many students here. We all pay the same thing.
Great, thank you.
Obviously, we don't have the cost for transportation. That's a huge benefit to Hartford. We're here, so. Thank you, John.
That Lori Emerson from, where are you still there? Lori, can you hear us? That's someone.
Yeah. Hi, Joe Denny from Queechee. My question is, talked about the debt service on the bond would be roughly a 1.5 million a year payment, right? That's the cost it would be to pay it back. So if we didn't do the bond, but we were forced into doing the improvements that are required by codes, required, that are minimal, patching holes in roofs, things like that. What's the marginal difference in the annual cost to a Hartford taxpayer? What is that difference? Understanding the difference in what we'd be paying in our tax rate between the two options would be crucial to understanding how to vote.
Peter Merrill, also from Queechee. So one of the reasons we're trying to do this bond is because we can spread the cost over the period of the bond as opposed to taking one big hit now. And that's important for two reasons. One is we are not in a position to take one big hit now. The other real issue, though, is only by diverting the expenses out of our operational accounts and into a bond are we able to get our estimated cost per student low enough that we're eligible to get a very significant tax savings from the state. So we would actually, if we were to try to pay it off now, not only would we be paying it in a much shorter period, but we would have a tax rate that would go so high, I don't even want to think about it. It really would be the worst of both worlds.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Deb Winslow from White River Junction. And I missed the first meeting, so this is all new to me. I've been doing a little bit of reading, and so I did read online the detail that you have for what's covered. And one thing that came up for me, we have two kids. One just graduated last year, and we have a junior at the high school right now, very involved with the performing arts. And so I was excited to see a line in there that dealt with the auditorium project, which was fire safety, ADA repairs and upgrades, smoke, evac, curtains, stage lighting and controls, egress areas and doors, house lighting controls, egress ramps and lighting. So that I thought was great. When I looked at that, I know, again, our kids have been in the performing arts program, and I continually hear, oh my gosh, I need a new lighting board, the lighting board, the lighting board. So I'm wondering, two questions. If the bond passes, when is the work potentially going to be done? And then the second is, if it doesn't pass, are all of those things that are in the projection here still going to happen?
So everything that you just listed there, it's an opportunity. There's some regulatory stuff we have to do. We need an updated smoke vac system for the stage. That's just true. We need to install sprinklers in the high school. The auditorium currently doesn't have them. So these are things we just need to do. There's an opportunity as we do them to do them in such a way that it represents an upgrade. We're not just going to go out and buy cheap curtains that meet code. We're going to buy curtains that meet the program's requirement. We're not just going to go in and make the lighting meet code. We're going to go in and make the lighting meet code in a way that provides that upgrade everybody's been asking about for years. So the trick here and the reason for putting all of those together is to do it in a kind of a holistic approach that captures the entire facility and all those needs and gets as many birds with one stone as possible. As far as timing goes, some of it is related to the larger facility. We're not going to go in and do sprinklers in the auditorium and then the rest of the building or vice versa. The economy of scale and just the practicality of that kind of project, we do it all at once. There's some sequencing involved where if I have to, open up the roof to do a smoke evac system, I'm not going to do the curtains and the lighting first. So some of it, the sequencing and when it happens is kind of a combination of how the project is developed and when the resources are available to do it.
What's an estimated timeline?
So
we're talking 10 years?
Oh, no.
2 years, 1 year?
This is within the next 2 years.
Within the next 2 years?
Yeah. So the planning for the sprinkler system and the fire alarm system are underway right now. We have engineers working on those plans. Depending on whether or not the bond passes is how those plans get phased. When those plans are built out, because that's kind of the elephant in the room as far as working in this building. Those are the two really big things. How that rolls out will impact how these other things are sequenced. The lighting over the stage, the lights themselves are fine. Those were replaced not that long ago, 6-7 years ago, maybe, but the lighting controls were not addressed. So what we're trying to do is sequence them in a way that we're not taking any steps backwards. So we're not, cutting a hole in the roof and then, putting lighting controls and taking lights down and putting them back up. We want it to be in a very methodical, thoughtful way. As far as getting it all done, the other complication that's true everywhere, but is particularly true there, is minimizing the impact on the program. We can't just shut down the theater for a year. That would make my life really easy. But it just doesn't work. So it's this interesting balance of, the construction guy in me just wants to have one big project like this and just whip through it and do it all. But the reality is we have to work around the larger picture in the whole facility and the program priorities and schedules. So I think realistically, some of the stuff that would impact the program the most, the curtains, the lighting, unfortunately are kind of the last in line, not because they're less important. It's just because it's kind of the finish work, so to speak. The life safety stuff comes first because it has the larger impact on the program.
Okay. I understand that. I also understand that, some of it affects, if the bond doesn't pass, some of this affects the programming for the kids. I mean, there's the board and then there's the floor on the stage.
Mhm.
which I didn't see anything about. There was a flooring item, but it didn't fall under auditorium. And that stage is literally taped together.
So,
And I know that might be on the plan, but I didn't see it on here.
so we already
That-
went in and dealt with the areas of the stage floor that were damaged. It's just an operational. We did that last spring, I think, with the stuff that had tape that was problematic. We replaced those sections of the stage. The finished flooring. The stage structure itself is fine. It's just the finish layer.
Right.
So we went in just as an operational maintenance matter and replaced that and repainted the whole stage floor. And they've been using it since then. We're not gonna, there will come a point in some period of years where we need to do that again on the whole stage floor. But that would probably be, given that it's now safe and presentable and repainted and has worked for the last several performances, I would not propose to replace it fresh until we've done all this other work that's going to get done on top of it.
Okay, I wasn't aware that it didn't have tape on it. To my understanding, I thought it did, so.
No, we went through,
Okay.
replaced probably about 25% of the flooring in there to get rid of those wear items.
Okay,
It was really
Great.
it was what you'd expect. It was like front and center stage where they rolled the piano on and off that had just simply worn out. So we just went in as a maintenance issue and took care of that.
if the bond does not pass, say it doesn't, I
Yep.
hope it does. But if it doesn't, those things that are not essentials, like the light board, again,
Well-
this is, we probably not gonna have an answer today, but that's a concern. And I know it's a concern for a lot of parents. Because sometimes we feel like the performing arts is, the stuff we get is we're working with like the bare minimum.
Well, here's the thing, the lighting thing, I get it, because I've dealt with the circuits tripping and been in there on the weekend making things work. And I think what's important and part of this process, but also just in the course of doing business, we're not going to go in and just fix it. There has to be a conversation with the people who run those programs, the people who are invested in those programs. So we fix it in a way that captures their aspirations and moves it in the right direction.
Sure.
We're not going to go in and just
No.
put in switches on off. If we're going to buy a lighting panel, we're going to get the right lighting panel. So
Right.
we're not going to do this in a vacuum. So, if the bond was not to pass, it would definitely slow things way down because I would have to focus on the regulatory life safety stuff that is required to just keep people safe and maintain the use of the facility.
Yep.
Without that attention, we would lose the use of the facility, rightfully so.
Mhm.
So it would definitely slow things down a lot. We wouldn't ignore the program or ignore the progress of the program, but we would not be able to move on it in as comprehensive a way as we'd like to.
Okay. All right. And some of this might be, I have other concerns too that are not in the bond, but I would bring maybe to the next school board meeting, possibly. But there is one other one related, to me, it's a health safety issue, which is which some people might not know about. I didn't have any idea until my daughter came home and said that the floor, this twice now in the band room was wet. Like once it flooded, I think it was around 2017. And then this past July, when we had all that rain,
Yep.
it flooded again. So there's literally under the rug in the band room, a manhole cover
Correct.
that leaks. And this stench that comes out of that hole and that they have to be around is horrible. And I don't understand. Now, I heard it was sealed, but obviously it wasn't sealed. So I'm interested in hearing what the permanent fix is going to be
So-
for that.
That, I know exactly what that is all too well. That the stormwater system for the roof of the entire facility, as well as the stormwater that comes off the hill outside here in the parking area, goes into a 24-inch stormwater main that runs underneath the high school. That's the way it was built. Whenever it was put in, it runs underneath the high school and then kind of cuts behind the football field and daylights over by the interstate. It's a lot of water. Over the years, as the facility was renovated and grew and there were more things were paved and things were changed, that size of the pipe didn't change. So when that happened in there, what happened is that pipe reached capacity and it's a manhole cover under the carpet and it quite literally pushed that manhole cover up. There's no way to seal it. Water doesn't compress. So the right fix is included in that. The way to fix that is to deal with this concrete stairway that's out here and the associated stormwater structures that start up on the hill and run all the way down and divert that water so we're not putting so much pressure under the school.
Okay, so
That-
that's part of the bond.
It is.
Okay,
correct.
so that would eliminate any water going through
And
that.
just as,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a
Okay.
huge project. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we just brought, just in the last week, I think, we moved forward with the engineering work to start looking at that stormwater project, because it's a major project that impacts everything from that hill to the interstate. There's a lot to it. Now, I will tell you in the interim, because I was here the morning after that got wet, and it's that, like, wet carpet smell.
And
we
more.
have, yeah, well, it's stormwater. It's just old. It's not. Yeah,
I understand, but we drive our cars, there's
yeah.
there's dog
No, it's-
feces,
yeah,
there's,
it's not,
it's not just
not a
water.
crystal clear stream. No.
No.
No. So what we have done is we looked at the ventilation system in that room, and we just enhanced that system. So now it runs on a timer and just runs. They can turn it on and off and let it run almost continuously, just for the air exchange in that room. That's not a fix, but that was to address, that smell in the room. We did extract the carpet, clean the carpet, dry it out. We didn't have mold develop or anything like that. But the reality is, the fix is to deal with that really old stormwater system that was installed whenever the school was built, and the modifications that have made sense. So it is in there. It just doesn't refer to the music room. It refers to stormwater and the concrete stairs.
Great, okay. And again, if the bond doesn't pass, is that high on the list?
Well,
Or is that kind of lower? at the bottom?
how it would get dealt with would change dramatically. Right now, we have these concrete stairs that are trying to make their way to Norwich and allowing some water to get in the building. We would have to address the water infiltration first. And then the stormwater, we are still going to move forward with the study and figure out what we have to do. But depending on the order of magnitude, it would have to get prioritized against a lot of other things that were just part of an annual budget. And it's a big project, and I'm not sure that we'd be able to take it on as quickly or comprehensively as we'd like to.
Okay.
Without that bond to do it.
Okay. I think that's it. The rest I can save for the school board meeting.
And I just want to speak to Deb's larger question about the performing arts and athletics and all of the programs that we all rely on. And I'm talking a lot as a parent right now, not just as a board member. I see a lot of value in the study piece of this bond and really being able to delve into what our kids need and where our programs are going and what the performing arts, like what is the ideal for that and what is the ideal for athletics and what are these places? Like, I'm a theater major, got my degree in theater, so like it's very near and dear to my heart, but like instead of taking what we have and trying to do the best we can with what we've got, I want to get really into what we want. And that would, the part of this study and this bond money would get us there. So that's my cut.
Lady Collins from Hartford. So I guess the question that's on my mind, and you'll have to bear with me, I did not make it the last presentation. So on my mind and a lot of other people in town of Hartford is that these are not problems that are crept up overnight. These are problems that have manifested themselves over years, and they've just got to the point of breaking. But they've been failing for a long time. We had roofs that deteriorated on us. We had a lawsuit. Money for that lawsuit was not spent on the roofs. We just came through a period, we had COVID, we had a ton of COVID relief money. There's been no reporting for the citizenry on where the funds for both the money from the roof settlement for the lawsuits, nor the money for where the COVID relief funds are spent. And some of these problems that you're dealing with today were present during those periods of time. And I'm just not sure why life safety issues then were not addressed with the money that we received from the federal government for the COVID relief funds, or some of the money that we got for the roofs weren't spent on roofs.
I can only speak to the roofs from what I know, looking back at old notes, and that was close to 30 years ago now. As I understand it, and I don't know, maybe somebody to share, that money was made part of a settlement.
Yeah, there was a lawsuit, and we settled.
There was a settlement.
So where'd the money go that we settled with? It should be put back in roofs.
Were you here?
No. So I can answer.
there are lots of things that should have happened. They didn't happen. They didn't happen due to decisions that were made well before I got on the board, well before Coach got the board, well before Tom showed up and was superintendent. These are decisions that were made by the people who were in place at that time. And since I wasn't around at the time, I can't answer to whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing. I've always regretted the fact that we didn't have that money taken and used in the way it was intended, but I didn't get that choice.
Again,
So,
I'm not laying
yeah.
blame on the current
Yeah, no,
board.
no, I'm just saying,
What I'm trying to understand
yeah,
is
with respect
more
to the,
reporting to where it went.
right, and we haven't really been able to figure that out terribly well. Tom, and then where did the roof go?
Where did the money from COVID relief funds?
Oh, well,
go?
the money in the COVID relief is simpler. That's it went where the federal government said to spend it. And there's full accounting for that. We've always told where it's going. It's gone for a number of programs, including putting
where can
mental
someone
health
find
care.
that program and match that up to dollar amount?
Yeah,
Peter?
so
Because that's the problem. It's never been presented.
No,
us.
we've had
we
school board
presented
meetings.
it several times.
Yeah,
Several times at school board meetings, and it's still on the school board page of the website. COVID
So
relief fund.
so it is on the school
Still
board
there, the
website. then.
presentation with all the accounting.
Okay.
And it's there's not something there you can ask Jake.
We're working on an updated sheet that.
Much as we would like them to, the federal government doesn't give us a large check and say, go spend it however you want to. They say, spend it on this, spend it on this, spend it on this, and spend it on this. And we have to account to them, which is one of the things that we deal with every year when we get an outside and external audit to make sure we're actually in compliance with.
I'm not saying that the money has not been spent correctly. It just,
you want to know
the
where it went.
transparency piece is
Right.
is a lot of people's minds
Yeah.
of where it went.
Yeah, and it's on the website.
I get.
Just one more quick question. Sarah, you mentioned committees maybe with the study. How, can you just say a little bit more about that? Like when that's going to happen and how do you?
I mean, I don't have a specific timeline because obviously we would need to reach out to companies and do RFPs and all of those kinds of things. But like, there's very little work that happens on a town or a school level that we don't want involvement, right? We want parent involvement. We want community member involvement. So I'm speaking for people and not, I'm speaking for myself, I guess. I would anticipate there being a consulting firm who then wants to speak to stakeholders, parent stakeholders, teacher stakeholders, the school board, the city. Like, are we going to use this space for also voting, right? Like how we would use it is going to be a key part of their study. And then that would inform the recommendations they would make to us. So like, I'm going to be first in line to be part of whatever that study is, because I'm incredibly invested in my kids and what's happening. So I do really anticipate there being a lot of stakeholder discussion in that, especially in the long-term facility planning.
We've got a couple people in Zoom land that want to talk. So first is Heidi. I'm going to give Heidi permission to talk. Heidi, can you hear me?
Yes, good evening. Hi, Heidi Duto, White River Junction, Vermont. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I have a few questions and a few comments to make. I attend quite a few meetings in town, and with all of the new development coming into town, I know that someone, and I'm not exactly sure who brought it up, I believe it might have been Lanny Collins. I'm not 100% sure. At a planning or a zoning meeting, I believe it was a zoning meeting. With the new developments coming in, I'm just curious as to why the developers are not putting any funds forward to do the studies as to where our students need to go as far as breaking our schools up into K-3, 4-6, 7-8, and then high school. The taxpayers shouldn't have to take all of this on. If the developers are coming in and putting more students into our town, this should fall some on them.
So
that's
this is-
that's my opinion. Once again, these should be all
Heidi?
fees.
If I can, so the way things ran until about 5 years ago or so, there were actually provisions in the way that we approved projects in this town. And I remember because I was on the planning commission for quite some time. And then being on the school board, we were dealt with it, whereby projects above a certain size had to put aside money to help pay for the consequences of the development in the town in terms of, gee, is there enough money for recreational parks and things like that? Is there enough money for the schools? Because big projects do have an impact on the existing infrastructure in the community. And you probably remember about 2008, the entire country's property market fell through the floor. And we went through a fairly extensive period up here in which there was no development of any kind. It just stopped. There were no houses selling. There were no development of any kind. Nothing was happening. And in an attempt to try to reduce the number of things that got in the way of any kind of development potentially coming in, the decision was made by the town and by the school board jointly at that time to remove that language from the process by which various projects got approved. So we now live in a different time. We now have vast interest in, or at least vast by our standards, interest in moving here. It might well be a very good thing to reconsider putting that language back in. At the moment, I'm pretty sure that it probably would not be a barrier at all to development. But at the time the decision was made to remove it, it was very much seen to be a barrier to any kind of development at all. And so that's why we don't have it now.
We've got another question from Jeff Arnold. Jeff, I'm going to allow you to talk.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
First question I have is, was last year's budget 36.4 million? Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I'm told by our treasurer that is the correct amount.
Okay. And this year is going to be 51 million? So 15 more million in 1 year?
You want to come up and talk to this? Got the numbers in your head tonight.
Jeff, this tonight is really about the bonds, and when we're going to get into the budget at the meeting on the 14th and then again on the 26th. So I'll let you.
But the budget is 51 million, right?
I'll let you answer that real quick. 1 second.
The warrant article 2, which is all funds that you vote on, is 52 million. The general fund this year, I think, has about a $4 million increase.
Only 4 million? So I don't understand that, because the general fund was 36 million in 2023-24. And so the general fund is only going up to 40 million? According to what you're saying?
Sorry, what was your question again, Jeff?
So you said that the general fund is only 4 million more than last year's budget, right?
Yes.
And last year's budget was 36 million. So
Yes.
what is the difference? What is the other 12 million from 40 to 52 million?
The other 12 million is the general fund and the collaborative funds.
No, you said the 40 million was the general fund.
Yes.
So the 12 million is what? Collaborative funds?
It's the tech center fund and the
Uh-huh.
collaborative funds, which include the RRC, Project Search, and the Wilder School.
Okay, so those, when you print this Hartford School District General Fund History of Budgets, that doesn't usually get included?
Not exactly, because when you're voting on the warrant article too, which is all funds. But I mean, I'm happy to post that on the website.
All right, so I do have a bond question. Thanks. There's a stormwater project for the high school, $1.5 million. Is that going to fix the 24-inch pipe that is backing up into the middle school interim?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of you broke up a little bit. Which project were you citing?
The stormwater project at the high school?
Yes,
1.5 million?
That is correct. That's part of that project.
Okay. And what is the RTU replacement in the high school that's costing $850,000?
Those are rooftop units, heating and ventilation system units. Many of them are, if not original, darn close to it. We're able to keep some of them functional. Frankly, some of them are just shut off at the moment. So those rooftop unit replacements is to address those units that have reached the end of their usable life. It's not that they haven't been maintained or taken care of. They're just, you can only make a wheel turn so many times.
What is their job again? Rooftop units?
Those rooftop units are part of the HVAC, the heating and ventilation system for the high school.
So they just send the old air out to the outside?
Well, they condition outside air to bring into the building. So it's both heating and ventilation.
Okay. Oh, I see. And there's $350,000 for a galvanized water supply line replacement. I know we have to replace lead pipes, but I didn't think galvanized pipes were a problem.
I'm stretching my memory here. One of the renovation, I think the third renovation that was done here, kind of the connection between the high school and the HACTC, for whatever reason, when it was done, the water supply lines were done with galvanized pipe, which isn't really a thing that I would not have advised at the time, but it was done. I don't know what to say. It was done a long time ago, and anything galvanized eventually wears out, and they have just started to rust. So we're still getting water. The water's not unsafe, but it's going to be a whole lot more reasonable to replace them in a planned, organized method rather than the death from 1,000 cuts when they start to fail.
Okay, and the other question I have, my last question is, so if the town passes the 1% sales tax, could the revenues from that tax be used to repair schools?
I think that's a completely separate issue.
I'm asking you, do you know whether it's possible to use that money?
Not at this point. I mean, that's not part of the rules that allow the money to cross from one municipality to the other. We're like two separate entities. So unless the town charter was changed, I don't think that would be possible.
Okay, so it actually has to be, a change has to appear in the charter to make that possible.
Might be bigger than that.
So it's a little more complicated than that. And I haven't done the legal research to back all of this up, but based on the way the state has tried to deal with funding education, they have set up a process to make sure that the money raised in a community does not directly correlate to how much money is spent in that community on education. They are trying to avoid what happened in New Hampshire with the Claremont decision, where some communities have almost no money and they have very, very bad schools, and other richer communities have much better schools. So the state basically said, we'll gather all the money collectively across the state and we will dole it out to the different towns so that the ability of a community to support its educational program is not dependent on the infrastructure and the money they can raise through taxes. Because of that, they don't want you coming up with a separate way to raise money for the schools, because that bypasses the entire process of how schools are funded in this state. So I think if you were to attempt to do that, you would have the entire government in Montpelier down here on our necks instantly.
We need to start wrapping up the school side of this information night, but we have another person online. Michelle, I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask a question, and then we have another question in the audience. So, Michelle, are you still up?
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
White River Junction, Vermont. So anyway, on a positive note, a young gentleman from Norwich got nominated for an Emmy. Speaking of the arts, so that's pretty exciting. I have a question. So I was on the board in 2017, and I know we had some projects. We had some projects brought up. I know we talked about the roof. That I think that was brought up like the first year I was on the board in 2017. But another thing that we accomplished was the parking lot, high school parking lot. And so I hear that there's a stormwater project now in the works in this bond. Was that something that we had hired an engineer for to look at when we were doing the parking lot? Because I remember having that discussion about creating rain gardens so that that we would have runoff. And so that's one question. I have another one. Just bear with me. You mentioned engineering work. Are we putting out RFPs for all that engineering work? And are those RFPs for the engineering work to determine what we need and going to be in that bond? Is the cost of those RFPs going to be in the bonds? That's my second question. And then the third thing I just wanted to share. So I've been reading about the fact that everyone's property taxes are expected to go up in Vermont, and I think people are panicking. And I've seen some articles. So this one is in 7 days, and the legislators heard from school and state officials about the quandary, and the gentleman Jake Feldman, a senior analyst with the Department of Taxes, pointed to unprecedented increases in anticipated education spending, as well as one-time funds the state used in previous years to buy down property tax rates. That has created a tax rate trough. This is a quote that you need to then climb out of. And I think they go on to say that multiple administrators are citing dropping CLA numbers as one of the main factors affecting their projected tax increases. And it also said that a lot of administrators are taking aim at Act 127, which some say has incentivized additional spending because of the vague language around the cap provision. So it looks like everybody's jumping on the bandwagon to use that cap provision this year. And it's my understanding that they're scrambling to figure out a fix in Montpelier. And it also says that Ways and Means Chair Kornheiser acknowledged that the law has proved problematic. And I guess apparently she wrote a letter to everybody saying don't do these bonds and spend all this money on infrastructure, asking people not to. So I'm just is that why we're doing this? Because of this, the the 5% cap provision, and elements of Act 127 that we would only be able to take advantage of this year. So those are my 3 questions.
So I can address the first 2 from a facility standpoint.
Okay.
The drainage project, the paving and drainage project that was done, and again, this is before my time, but I've spent a lot of time understanding that project and how it relates to where we are now. The scope of that work was limited to the drainage plan in front of the high school, the parking area, and as it proceeds down towards Route 5, the scope of that work never included anything up past that concrete stairway up into the hill, nor did it take into account the roof drains on the high school and the HACTC. So they are absolutely related, but the scope of that first project did not address this. So it's not that we're taking a step backwards or sideways. It's just kind of a concurrent situation. Now, this drainage project that we're looking at to deal with the stormwater running into the high school will absolutely impact the work that was done. And that kind of leads into your second question. The soft costs involved, meaning the research and the engineering research that eventually leads to design and an RFP for construction. What we have done now is engaged an engineer to do a study of the existing situation so that when we do put together an RFP, it's fully informed both by the work that was done previously and the work we need to do moving forward. So to answer your question about will there be RFPs, absolutely. The work will not be put out there without a fully informed RFP. We're doing the work already to get that study in place so that we know everything we need to do. We know everything we need to know to do it right when we do it.
You're gonna address the tax issue quickly, and we got one other question here, and then we gotta let the town do their thing.
Very, very quickly on the tax thing, and we can address this more thoroughly if people wish at the budget meeting. But basically, the revenue raising process that I described in my answer to the previous question worked moderately well when there was no inflation in the system. It was not designed to deal with rising prices. In fact, the entire purpose of it was to penalize institutions that needed more money and tried to spend more money. It was very carefully calibrated to do that. As a result, when there was all of a sudden inflation due to the disruption of supply chains and COVID and all of the other things that happened, that resulted in significantly higher costs for schools. I mean, when paper costs more and gas costs more and paint costs more and toilet paper costs more, money's got to come from somewhere. And that passes through. The system just wasn't designed to handle it, and it didn't produce good results. On top of that, the state in its glorious wisdom determined that they were much better than we were at negotiating things with the collective teachers unions. And one of the things they wanted to do was take over the negotiations over healthcare coverage. And well, that went extraordinarily well. We had a 16% increase in healthcare coverage. And when 75% of your costs are people, you can imagine what that does to your overall costs. So we had the built-in costs that the state as a whole is facing, and then the healthcare costs that we're facing because of the way that negotiation worked out. And the fact that the portions of the program that are designed to deal with equity in terms of making sure that nobody played any games with the evaluation of the grand list didn't take into account that there could be a sudden huge demand increase, which would adjust the prices that people were willing to pay a whole lot faster than we were willing or able to do tax assessments on people's property. Meant everything all went out of whack at exactly the same time. And if we hadn't tried very hard to make sure that our per pupil costs stayed under 10%, which meant that we were able to deal with the provisions the state had put in place in terms of capping tax increases. The very last set of numbers I saw said a tax increase of property taxes for the school portion of your property bill were going to be well over 40%. So yeah, everything hits at exactly the right time in the wrong way. It's a mess.
It's Kathy Millisick Wilder. I promised Tom I'd be fast. When you were talking before about developers in response to Heidi Duto's question, and you referred to that language,
Yeah.
could we specify that that language is impact fees?
Yeah.
Thank you. I promised you.
I'll be really fast. For the board, would it be helpful if we did tours of the facility for families and members of the community to see what needs to get done? I have kids in a lot of schools, but not all of them. So, you know, like I have Queechee, middle school, high school, but if that would all be helpful to.
Our director of facilities says he's more than happy to lead the parade.
No, so very quickly, I think that some of the larger projects, as was discussed earlier, would have to have some input. And I think having stepped foot on every square inch of this district, you probably don't want to, but for the big projects, absolutely. There's got to be eyes on it other than mine, other than theirs, so that it's a fully informed process. And this is a quick pitch that maybe goes a little bit to that. About 3 weeks ago, we set up a email address called bondquestions@hartfordschools.net. So if anyone wants details, and I'm checking it, and not that I need more email or want more email, nobody does, but the reality is good questions asked and answered just lend credibility to the whole process. So that's up now. If there's questions that follow this or come up when you're discussing with other people, that's a really good way to get more precise, more granular on some of these issues. Thanks.
Can you repeat that, John, the email address?
Yeah, it's bondquestions@hartfordschools.net.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah and Jonathan and Jake and Peter for answering so many questions. Thank you to the audience and folks here and folks out in Zoom cyberspace and asking questions. Next up, we have Chief Cooney, going to go over the fire, Queechee fire bond.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I know that everybody's been sitting in chairs since for about an hour now, so I'm going to go quickly through my presentation and move right to questions if you have them. I have two presentations for you this evening coming from the town. The first is the warrant ballot item for the Fire Station 2 renovation bond. This is the language that will appear on the ballot this year. We're asking for $1.3 million for the construction and improvements done to the Queechee Fire Station located on Willard Road. As you know, the community has been growing over the last, over many years. And as we experience growth in the community, the demand on emergency services has increased as well. And during a gap analysis and risk assessment in 2020, we recognized that about 25% of the emergency calls are occurring in the villages of Queechee and portions of West Hartford. To equalize the response, we also recognize that the response times of the Queechee area and areas of West Hartford were our longest, specifically for our medical calls, which makes up about 70% of the total call volume in the fire department. We brought this information to the select board with a proposal of staffing the existing Queechee Fire Station with personnel, which have been unstaffed for many years and only serviced by a call fire department way back in the 80s and 90s. So currently you have two fire stations, one on the VA Cutoff Road, one on Willard Road in Queechee. The main fire station staffed with 4 personnel, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the Queechee station is staffed with 2 personnel with a fire engine and an ambulance to cover emergency calls in that area. The fire station in Queechee was dedicated back in 1982. It was basically a garage that stored fire apparatus. And then first responders responded to that, to fire emergencies when they occurred in the village of Queechee. What it didn't ever have was an ambulance located at that site. So in 2021, we added 2 full-time employees to the site and an ambulance to respond to emergency calls, and found that we were reducing the response time to emergencies in Queechee and areas of West Hartford by half. So what would have been a 15-minute response from the VA cutoff road was now around 7 minutes or less by having staff in that area. In 2021, to accommodate having staff on location for 24 hours, we rented a living trailer for the staff to reside in during their 24-hour shift. As you can see, we're servicing this community, this quite large community, from 2 fire stations. The first on the blue and white area is the VA Cutoff Road Station, and that services the Wilder, White River Junction, and areas of West Hartford, using Route 14 as kind of the delineator. And the Queechee Station on Willard Road services all those regions. We have been working with Studio Nexus, and earlier in this year, we awarded the construction management bid for this construction project to Estes and Gallup. These are the conceptual designs of an addition. So they're taking the existing 2-bay garage area and adding 2 wings to the exterior portions of the building to create office and living spaces for the fire personnel and staff. The intent here was to plan for about a 50-year existence of this station, allowing what now is only 2 people to go up to allow for 4 over time. And these are just a few exterior photos. Show you some interior space. We're also providing space for the Hartford Police Department to have an office out there as well for their Queechee Patrol officer. And an illustration from the Vermont Bond Bank for a $1.3 million bond over 20 years. Shows the estimation. So for a principal of 1.3 million for the term of the loan, we're paying interest of $567,420. The impact to the municipal budget for FY25 is $43,648 interest only payment in FY25. And I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has on this project. Okay, I'm going to move to my next one, and I'm happy to answer any on this one if they come up. The next one that I've been asked to speak on is the usage of the local option tax. So as you know, the town collects local option tax revenue. This request is to ask the voters to use 200,000 of current local option tax funds, or funds that are already planned to be collected by the town, for the purchase of an ambulance for the town fire department. This would be to replace a 2016 Ford F-150 ambulance with 142,000 miles. The cost of the ambulance for a 2023 ambulance is about $311,000, with an estimated trade value of the existing ambulance of 10. This is applying $200,000 of lot funds and then using the existing capital reserve account for the fire department to supplement the rest of the purchase of the vehicle, and allows us to build the reserve account as well for future replacement of a piece of fire apparatus. And any questions on the local option tax?
Quick question. Does the local option tax include any revenue from Airbnb or short-term rentals?
Currently, I don't know the answer to that, Mike.
I think technically, like, you could be out of the rooms.
If I have to, you have to.
I think one of the issues is that, some towns have like a short-term rental registry, so they know people who are using their properties as Airbnbs, things like that. So I think most likely the 1% on rooms would apply, but I don't think we have any idea who's actually, using their house as an Airbnb, something like that. So it's more a matter of identifying the population and being able to collect the tax.
It may be that, yeah, they're just not paying the tax they're supposed to, and we don't really know.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And if no questions, I'll kick it over to Scott Hausler for his requests.
I'm remiss in my duties. We do have a hand raised in Zoom, Jeff Arnold.
Yep.
I'm gonna let Jeff talk. Jeff,
Thanks.
you're up.
Hi, Scott. I just wanted to ask about the ambulances because I know we used local option tax in 2021, $200,000 to buy one, and $227K in 2019 to buy one. I was wondering how many ambulances we own.
We have 3 ambulances, Jeff, that rotate through stock. So we try to keep the life expectancy is about 8 to 10 years on a unit, and they rotate depending on mileage. As the public safety mechanic looks at the vehicle, we determine what rotation it's going to be in, to which station, which one it serves. But we replace them about 8 to 10 years. The problem has been, and some of it's been to COVID due to the supply chain. When you order an ambulance, it takes like 3 years for you to get it. The ambulance I've ordered currently was requested. It's already on order by the town back in May of 2022. And in speaking to the vendor like 2 weeks ago, Ford has not even sent the chassis yet to the manufacturer. So it hasn't even begun construction on this specific vehicle. But we do rotate the vehicles. There is a reserve account that we could use 100% of the purchase of the vehicle to come from the reserve account if we chose to. But since the 200,000 is available within the local option tax account, it allows that reserve to build because the purchase of fire apparatus is upwards of $900,000 for a piece of fire apparatus. This allows us to build that reserve for that future purchase.
Okay, so that means that since we purchased the ambulance in 2019 and then another one in 2021, so that we don't have to buy any ambulances until 2029, is that right?
Yeah, it'd be the oldest ambulance we have now is a 2019. Once this one goes, the oldest one will be a 2019 unit.
All right, so then we can use the local option tax for other things.
Yes.
For the next 10 years.
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. We have another question from, one second here. Elise Merrill. Elise, you have a question? Yeah.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Tom. Chief, going back to the Queechee Fire Department, the last time you presented this, you were asked about ways of making this building more environmentally efficient. And you mentioned that you were going to bring that back to the architects. I'm wondering if you've had a chance to do that and if any changes would affect the cost for this building.
I did happen to do that actually the next day after the meeting. So the carport actually is in a position to be used to support a photovoltaic system if the town would choose to do it. And in speaking with the town's environmental sustainability coordinator, Dana Clausen, the problem is the town is using all our PV credits currently. So any system that would be installed in this building has to support the building itself. It can't be sold back to the grid. So the system for solar to occur here, it has to be utilized through batteries or direct usage there. But there's intent to do as many as we can environmental upgrades to the structure as well.
Sit on Zoom.
Good.
Thank you, Chief.
Is that for me?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, well, I've been asked to speak on two projects that we're presenting for local options tax funding. So we'll quickly go through that. The first one is our Lyman Point Park project. It's important for you all to know that this particular project and the type of project that we're proposing does meet our department's vision and mission statement. I won't go into detail, but it's important for you to know that part of our agency supports the type of work that we're planning, we'd like to do. So the Lyman Point Park project is an improvement project that's going to consist of $325,000. $100,000 of that particular project is already in our reserve account. So we're asking for $225 of local options tax funds to support this project. What do we get? As you can see here, it's going to be a park that's complex that has currently has handicap accessibility inclusive issues. It's hard to access the park. It's not a safe access to the park from the parking lot, from sidewalks. The amenities are in need of repair that we have there, and we've got a new vision for that particular park. So what we're looking at is an accessible and inclusive play feature at the facility, some covered picnic tables, accessible pedestrian pathway that connects what we call Lyman East and West, safe access connecting the sidewalks to the parking lot, like I mentioned previously, fencing, benches, river overlook, the Connecticut and White River, trying to provide some scenic awareness and beauty to the park location, and a potential of relocation of existing performance stage is kind of the overall plan concept of what we're looking at doing. Gives you kind of a visual. Again, the project is going to be paid for, or would be paid for, $100,000 of current reserve that is set aside for park amenities and park improvements. And plus, we're requesting the $225,000 by voters to approve of local options tax funding. We're also going to pursue various grants that are available for these types of projects. And that'll be important for our group and our committee and our community to pursue. One thing I just want to make sure that everybody is aware, the local options tax that we're talking about is the existing local options tax. So these are existing rooms and meals revenue that comes in. And that's how this particular project, we're requesting the funding to utilize for that purpose. So just want to make sure there's no confusion and related to what local options tax funds we're talking about. So these are existing funds that are in place similar to, or the same funds the chief is asking for related to the ambulance. Where are we right now within the project? So we've got ongoing stakeholder meetings, the RFP process for architectural rendering and some civil plans related to some of the challenges we might have within the park layout, and the improvements yielded 5 vendors. So we're right now in the process of reviewing those RFPs. The RFP submission, we hope to be done within a couple weeks, so we can pursue utilizing our existing funds, reserve account funds, so we can begin working on this project. Whether or not the local options tax fund passes for the project, we still need to address some of the issues within the park, and we still have a vision for the park that we want to prepare and be ready for. The word language is, again, asking for $225,000 of existing local options tax funds for the purpose of the Lyman Point Park improvements, which includes the handicap accessibility, the pathway, inclusive play, and park features. And a vote yes, and all the benefits of this wonderful project right here for you. So I'm here to answer any questions that you might have related to the Lyman Point Park Improvement Project.
Hey Scott, Sara Campbell, White River Junction. I have a heavy user of this park at my house. And I'm just curious how you had mentioned the stakeholder process was underway. How is that happening? Is that just the existing Parks and Rec Committee? Has there been like outreach? I'm just curious.
So the Park and Rec Commission, the committee, what we decided to do was to try to encourage some stakeholders within the community, some individuals that might be interested in being a part of this project. And so we have some folks from the Special Needs Support Center that has been involved. We've got a few parents that have come to the table just to work with us at this point in time to come up with some, what you would like to see within the project. So part of the RFP process will be some community outreach. So there will be opportunities for the community to come together to work with this committee and be a part of the process.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Scott. Joe Denny from Queechee. Quick question. You mentioned that funds for this would come from the local options tax as for the request for the ambulance. Are there sufficient funds to do both if both are approved by voters, or is it a competitive, if one's a yes, the other has to be a no?
No. My understanding is that there's no competition within this. We go through a process of requesting use of funds for various projects as a whole town. So we went before the town manager, finance director, then it's vetted at the select board level to determine what they want to present to the voters for local options tax spending.
Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions related to Lyman Point Park? Nope. Okay. So I've been asked to present regarding our village's beautification plan. This particular plan is requesting $30,000 of local options tax funds. So you'll have an opportunity on the ballot to choose whether or not you'd like to fund this particular project. I've been involved in some beautification discussions with planning development and some other businesses in the community related to improving the beautification in our downtown village of White River Junction. So what we've done and what are proposing after some conversations with many folks is to try to put an entire village beautification plan in place. So what we're asking is to fund $30,000 through local options tax. And what would happen at that point in time is there would be stakeholders put together related to how they would like to see various beautification uses and put to place flower plants in downtown White River Junction. How can we also engage other villages, Wilder, West Hartford? A variety of opportunities hopefully will be available from folks as we start talking about how do we want to beautify our community. So there'll be some near-term and long-term potential projects. The near term is just trying to get this off the ground and identify what it is. Purchasing the pots, identifying how the process is going to work. Are we going to hire somebody? Are we going to contract somebody? So the plan would be to implement something in our first year of operation related to various plants in the downtown villages, and then move to potential some long-term projects like entrance signage into the communities, as well as other potential projects. How will this be paid for? FY25, we're asking for the lot funding of $30,000. And that's going to also help us purchase all the equipment and supplies necessary to potentially implement this program. It's also important to understand that we would develop a plan that would make this sustainable. A lot of communities will put this into place, and there's a lot of advertising opportunities for businesses, donations that can come in to help the program become a sustainable fund, so it doesn't just happen a couple years and then nothing happens after that. So again, this is utilizing the local options tax existing funds like we talked about with the other project. I just want to make sure that it's you understand that it's coming from the existing fund that's in place. So we'll start by developing the program. Seasonal plantings will go in the villages, however that's been identified at taking place. We hope to have a plan that will, somebody will be able to take and move forward with, so the project can sustain itself for years to come. There's also an opportunity here, potentially. Banner programs are part of those beautification plans in communities. As you might know, there is the Hometown Hero program that's been in the works. So, this type of project could help implement that program and also keep it sustainable as well. The village planners would be a self-watering wicking type of system. We already have a few of those that work really well. Doesn't require a lot of staff time, and you can put several gallons of water in the units. All you need is somebody that understands how to keep flowers alive. And like I mentioned before, we're not exactly sure how it'll be managed, either through a staff person, seasonal type of person, or a voluntary effort group or a contracted service. This kind of looks some of those particular pots that we're talking about using, the self-wicking type of system, as well as some urban vases that could be put in various villages. And again, it's important to understand we're not just talking about White River Junction. However, that is kind of our own downtown with many businesses. So they would probably reap the benefit of most of it, but not all of it. And the warrant language that would be on the ballot for you to hopefully vote yes on this project. And any questions you might have.
Here, yes, that's a couple of
Thank you, Scott Farnsworth, Town of Hartford. Nice job, Mr. Hausler. I'm curious, we have a fantastic group in the town of Hartford that does gardening now, currently, Friends of Hartford Gardening or something, master gardeners all around town. Will this project be working in tandem with that group, or will they be two separate groups beautifying?
I have a feeling that they would be stakeholders in the project. We haven't gotten to that level, but it would be important for them to be involved. But one thing I think is pretty clear, we don't want to just say, this is the program, we want you to implement it. So it's got to be an additional project that's managed and operating on its own with the support of the Garden Friends.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you. Got a couple people online.
Oh boy.
Lori Dickerson, you have a question for Scott?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, oh, thank goodness. Scott, I just, you keep talking about sustainability as far as this project, and I've been hearing a lot of talk this evening as far as using the local option tax, and it just seems like there's a lot of hands that want to, dip into that pot. And, I know that there's also an issue on the ballot this year to increase that. And it greatly concerns me that we're going to implement a project and all of a sudden, the sustainability is, if you get 30,000 this year, and what if you don't get 30,000 next year? Then do you come to the town and say, oh my, we love this, but now we need another $30,000. So I hope you can address that. Thanks.
That's a tough question.
Well, you didn't expect anything easy from me, did you?
No, not when I heard your name. It was like, oh boy. So, I really feel confident about this particular project being able to sustain itself through a sponsorship type of program and potentially other, grants that support things like this. Yeah, it might take some, department funding. It might also take the downtown merchant group that is very active in White River Junction. It might take some of their support to make this happen financially. I think there is some philosophical conversation that can happen about the local options tax funds. These particular funds being paid by those that might be eating or in our restaurants or staying in hotels. I think my opinion is this is a good use of those particular funds. Whether or not we come back to the coffers again and ask again for more money or enough to sustain it, I'm not quite sure what that would be, but I think our objective and our goal would be to try to find other ways to support it other than tax dollars and operational dollars. I don't perceive it being any part of like the Parks and Rec department. But I'm unsure until we get it going to really see how it's going to operate.
Right. But I just think as far as your presentation where you're talking about sustainability, I don't think there is a clear path forward when you speak to that. And that's a great concern of mine. And I think other taxpayers need to be aware of that. But thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. I wish I was a little more clear, I guess, but not understanding exactly what, how it's going to function and operate until we put it together. We need this kind of a seed money to purchase the equipment and then get the operations moving. So we know exactly what it's going to cost to do it annually. But
Get another
Thank you.
question on Zoom from Michelle. I'm going to give Michelle permission to talk.
Hey, Scott, thanks for your presentation. I don't want you to cringe when I'm on the Zoom too, but I just have so having done the planters a few years back at the dog park, I know what not to do. I know it seems to me like this is a bigger operation, and so you'd probably be doing an RFP with companies that create these type of containers and systems that work with municipalities. And then I think also looking at the past summer, just being a gardener myself, and the amount of rain we had killed the annuals. And then the opposite of not having enough rain can kill the annual. So I think in order to be successful, to really do research on, plants and flowers, like petunias, forget it. Who's going to be pinching all those petunias, right? Getting up on the ladder and pinching them. Anyway. So that's just my question, whether, you guys have a company that you're using and or have you researched, what type of plants and how, again, I guess somebody already asked you how this is going to work. And so this year is just a test, but thanks for letting me speak.
Sure. And as for your question, yes, we're working with a landscaper just to assist us in, what this might look like. And we actually had a landscaper that did the 4 pots that were down in, or the vases that were down in White River Junction. And yes, the rain is a challenge, but we will definitely be seeking professional support to get the right project in place. So thank you.
That
All done?
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Scott. I think Mike's up on the charge.
All right. I think I can actually make this bigger. Maybe. Oh God, it's all the stuff's coming up. I can't see where it. Oh, here we go. Anyone want to come do this for me? But where's the? Oh God. What's that? Yeah, cursor disappeared. I'm gonna let you do this one, Tom.
Where is it?
There it is.
You know what it is? It's the.
It's because that's still kind of out.
Good. Better? Yeah.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Hoyt from West Hartford. I'm on the select board. I'm going to walk through the changes that have been proposed for our town charter. This was first introduced publicly or first reviewed on Information Night. And then the board took some input then. We had our first of two public hearings was at our last board meeting where we made some changes to the proposal. We have our second public hearing on the charter at tomorrow's meeting. So tonight's just another night to go through and sort of review the changes that are being proposed. So what we have and what we're going to go through is a draft of the entire charter. New language is underlined. Language that's being struck is struck through. So there's a lot in here where you may not see any changes. That's just existing language in the charter. So I think our first, hold on. Oh God. Here we go. So I think our first change in the charter, there's a section in the charter that just lists like the particular powers that the town has. And so this is just a clarifying language, basically saying that these are the particular powers of the town as opposed to like the school. All right, so the first change, and this is probably the most substantive one, and well, it is the most substantive one in the charter revision, is a change to the local option tax. And as we've heard a bunch tonight, the local option tax is a 1% tax that Hartford currently levies on rooms, meals, and alcoholic beverages. It comes in, it goes into a fund. The select board proposes how it might be used in each budget, and then it requires voter approval before we actually expend the funds in the way that we're suggesting. So what this would do is that it would increase sort of the universe of things that are subject to the 1% tax. So this would add a sales tax to the rooms, meals, and alcoholic beverages. This means is that anything in the town that's already subject to the Vermont sales tax would also be subject to an additional 1% tax. This would have the practical effect in town of going from a 6% state sales tax to a 7% tax, with 1% coming to the town. There are a number of items that the state excludes from sales tax. So food, clothing, medical supplies, things like that, in an attempt to make it a more progressive tax. So, the actual question itself is pretty straightforward. Do we want to begin taxing 1% of sales, or do we not want to include that new authority? I'm working with the town manager to try and get up some information about the local option tax and the experience that other municipalities have had with it. Most of the municipalities in the state which have a local option sales tax are not on the river, except for Brattleboro. And Brattleboro actually has a fairly extensive report of how the local option tax was introduced and implemented in their municipality. So that's the local option tax. Now we'll go through the rest of the changes, none of which are particularly, substantive, really. So in section B1, talks about the school and town meeting committee. We wanted to actually put in that they're responsible for the warrant information night. That's a great meeting. I think people really enjoy it. It was not mentioned as one of the meetings that they put on, so we just wanted to clarify that. In B2, this is the composition of the town and school meeting committee. We're taking away essentially the authority of the town clerk to appoint one member to that committee. The town clerk was an elected position. Now that they're appointed, we felt that the appointing body should all be elected as opposed to one person who's just appointed. So that's that. let's see, what is our next change? Oh, at the very bottom in G. So these are warnings for the town and school district meetings. We want to add in there that any agendas, any information about those should be posted on social media, right? So we already do it on the town school websites, the newspapers, but social media, like Town of Hartford has a Facebook page, just try to expand the number of avenues where people can learn about this stuff. Next change. Okay. A couple changes here in elected officers. One for the town moderator and one for the school moderator. But basically the one moderator is UC&E for the town. We're changing the term of the moderator from 1 year to 3, which seems to align better with the other elected offices in the town. Also prevents the moderator from having to go out and get the signatures every year. Where's the next one? Is there anything on here? Doesn't look like it. Yes, like I said, there's a lot that's like unchanged in here. So we'll have to go. Okay, so there's a section of appointed officers. Two things here. So in C, we're just stating that the duties of the collector of delinquent taxes shall be assumed by the town manager or their designee. And that is, in fact, the case of how things work presently. So that's just clarification. However, D is new. So an assistant town treasurer. The idea here is that the town treasurer may appoint an assistant town treasurer, maybe delegated some or all of the powers of the town treasurer on a temporary basis by the town treasurer. What happened there? Oh, there we go. Okay, so basically it's the ability of the town treasurer to appoint some of their duties to the assistant town treasurer in the town treasurer's absence. The town treasurer just has to let the town manager and the school superintendent know. And then the assistant town treasurer shall be compensated at the same rate as the town treasurer when they exercise the powers of the town treasurer. So, if our town treasurer is out of town on a vacation, something like that, he or she can delegate their authority to an assistant who can perform those duties in the town treasurer's absence. I think that's actually it, to be honest. So, a couple kind of, procedural changes. And then the local option tax is sort of the big one, the most substantive one. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Melissa Wilder again.
Yeah.
Could you explain, well, two things. One, going forward, I would like to see discussion of short-term rentals as far as specifics for the local option tax, not for tonight, but
Yep, sure.
going forward.
It's a good.
Could you explain, because I think there's a lot of confusion out there about what our charter actually means. We have state statutes and then we have our own specific town of Hartford ones that can kind of fill in the blanks or be more specific to us. Could you just explain how a charter works real briefly? I know there's a lot of misinformation.
I'll do it to the best of my ability. But I think the general idea of municipal government in Vermont is that we are a creature of the state. So the state basically tells us what we can do and what we can't do, right? And there are areas where we have the ability, to act on our own in the town, things like that. And then there are areas where the town gives us specific power. So one specific power the state gives a town, and I'll just mention, a couple, is a local option tax, right? We don't have to do it. We can do part of it, but there's a specific authorization there. State allows us to regulate short-term rentals. We haven't in the town. But as you mentioned, maybe that's something we'll look at going forward. We have the ability to regulate salvage yards. That's another one in particular. Towns also have some ability, right? Like whether they want to have areas in the town designated for like open containers, things like that, right? So basically in areas where we can act, we can set policy for the town that may be different from other municipalities. There are areas basically where the state and state statute is going to reign supreme, right? If before cannabis legalization, we decided as a town, we wanted to legalize cannabis, we couldn't. Right. Essentially, the state law is supreme over the municipality. So we act, when and where we can. So there are contours of our power that are probably not fully defined yet, right? Like if we wanted to regulate, regular rental housing in some fashion, we know what we can do, I think, but some questions, would have to eventually be sort of explored by the courts and stuff, right? So it's just one of those cases where we can do what the state lets us do. For all the talk of local control, we get some, but we're not just free to run our own republic here. You know what I mean? Basically, I mean, there are limits to what we can do.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Sara Campbell, White River Junction.
Hey, sir.
Can you just clarify when we're voting, the 1% is a separate line item and then everything else in the charter is an all or nothing, right? It's not line items on all the other things.
Basically, right? So the way you're going to get it in the ballot booth is that there's going to be a separate item just on the 1% sales tax. And then there will be essentially a description of some of the other changes that are in there that you can vote separately, right? Because some of the other changes, they may be, comparatively minor to the sales tax. We'd like to see get through, right? But if there are enough people in town who are just like, we don't want a sales tax, then you can vote against that and vote for the other provisions, right? So it's not an all or nothing. And then, of course, once suppose all of this passes, that's not the end of it, right? What happens is one or more of our representatives in Montpelier will likely introduce a charter change bill. And it'll be put into the legislative format, which looks something like this. It'll go through the legal process there. It'll go to the Government Operations Committee in the House. Eventually, if it passes the House and the Senate, it goes to the governor to sign. So we're in the second year of a biennium, right? So the legislative session is 2 years. We're in the second one, right? And if this passes and gets introduced, we're looking March, April till it gets introduced. Usually the sessions end like early or mid-May, right? And so if it gets introduced, it doesn't go anywhere. All the bills die at the end of the session. So I don't quite know if that means we can bring it up again or if we have to go through this whole process again. But I think that's just sort of there to illustrate like we're at the beginning of a process, right? And there are a lot of things that can happen between now and then, including legislators deciding just not to act on it, governor vetoing it, right? So there's all sorts of things that could happen between now and then. But we're hopeful that we at least get an affirmative vote, I think, on voting day. Okay.
Up two.
Oh, okay.
Jeff had his hand up first, so I'm gonna let Jeff Arnold talk.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Mike. So I am all for this 1% sales tax because so far on the local option tax, we've raised $1.8 million. That's gone for $627,000 has been spent on ambulances, $330,000 on upkeep of our cemeteries. All these would have been in the operating budget. $262,000 for fire department, VHF, and simulcast repeaters. $60K for the climate action reserve. And now $250K is being asked for Parks and Rec. Most of these things are necessities that would have raised our taxes. And it's projected that we're going to get $650 to $1 million on this 1% tax. It's not really going to hurt us. Like there was big scare tactics when the 1% lot tax came up back in 2018. But it hasn't affected our restaurant industry. What's affected is just basically COVID and lack of employees. If we raise, say, $1 million in revenues from this 1% tax, it's not like putting out a bond where we're paying interest. We'll be making interest instead. So you put $1 million in the bank, you're making $40K a year at 4%. It's not really a rise in our taxes compared to the $2,300 increase in our taxes for a $300K house. It's nowhere near that kind of impact. And I don't hear any business owners speaking out against it. And I'd like to see select board members supporting it because everybody seems to be like afraid to support it, and it's not going to pass unless the select board puts some weight behind it. One person so far has, and that's Kim Souza. I'd like to see some other people that also support it. I don't want to miss this opportunity. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Just a couple things. I think you're right. You know, we've been using it for items that are necessities. It helps defray the increase in the property tax. You know, I think a lot of communities have used this kind of money creatively and successfully. The other thing, you know, look, we're on the border with New Hampshire. It is what it is, right? We'd be going from 6 to 7. They're at 0. You know, I'm not going from 0 to 7. You know, what's done is done. I mean, the big box stores are there because of the interstates and how they came through, right? This may have had an effect, you know, at some point in the 60s when it was first introduced in Vermont. But, you know, I mean, I think that's over it. And, you know, we're making a choice to forego revenue that I think could be very helpful, especially as Hartford grows and the need for services remains. But no one likes a tax increase, and this can help defray that. So I certainly support it. Yeah, so thanks.
Got a question from Elise Holzberg Merrill. Elise, I'm going to allow you to talk.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you, Mike, also. If this is not something that can be spoken to about this time, please feel free to say that. I'm wondering if you could speak on the amount of money you expect to generate from the parking meters that were presented last year and have not yet been installed, and how that might stack up against the 1% lot.
Right. Thank you. We have heard some estimates, I think, about the revenue of the parking meters. I don't know it off the top of my head. I'm not sure whether any of our board members or town manager has an idea. But we can certainly get you an estimate if you'd like. Let's see what the town manager has to say. John?
I've been told by Lori Hirschfield, our planning department director, to be very careful about these estimates because they're speculative to a great degree. But I believe that we were looking at something in the neighborhood of $250,000, some of which would have to be put back in to monitoring and enforcement. So don't count these chickens before they're hatched is my suggestion.
Thank you, John. Any follow-up to that question?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question?
All right, thanks, everybody.
I just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I thought that was great. It was just something that the town manager and I wanted to do, the select board and the school board wanted to do for your information. So thank you so much for coming out. Have a great night.